great to see you again. So we do have a presentation today. We have members of the Petaluma PCAC group who are going to present to us about their exciting findings and summaries of the work that they've done. It's the second iteration from what I understand of this group. We received a great presentation about a month or so ago from them, but they wanted to come and present before the Transit Advisory Committee tonight because a lot of their findings and work were specific to transit. So I think we're going to get them connected now via Zoom. So bear with us, and it may take us just a minute or two.
Actually, during that minute, I realized I skipped the roll call, it's my mistake. I read general public comment, you went right past it. Do we want to do roll call before we move into the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Alden,
Here.
Chisholm, Calgin,
Here.
Pastrick, Tar,
Here.
Posake.
Here. Here. Here.
All right. So I believe we would be on to public comment next.
Man, I went completely the wrong place, didn't I? Thanks for correcting me. Well, given there's no one in the chamber, I think we can safely say there's not going to be any general comment. So now we truly are on to the presentation.
Okay. All right. Are we all connected through the presentation? Do we have Ray available?
Hello, my name is Julio. I'm with PCAT, but I think Ree's having trouble joining. She gave me a link, but I'm not sure if that's the same link that she gave me will work for her. It seems like she's having trouble getting in.
All right. Bear with us for just a second. Okay, I think she's just joining us right now. Are you there, Ree? Can you hear us?
I am here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So you have the floor, and I believe you can share screen if needed, but otherwise, take it away.
Perfect. Okay, so let me get the presentation up real quick. I'm having, again, technical difficulties. I'm not sure if I'll be able to share my screen.
I might be able to. Let me see.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience.
No worries.
Actually, you know what? I should be able to, so I'll go ahead and just start sharing now, and we can get into it. Okay, here we go. So again, thank you all very much for your patience. I appreciate it so much. Again, my name is Ree Bussey, she, her pronouns. I am the program coordinator for Petaluma Equitable Climate Action Coalition through Daily Acts. And for our agenda, we'll just do a brief welcome and introductions. And then also, I'm sure most of you know what PCAC is and why it's important. Our context and methodology will be very brief. We'll spend most of our time on the actual recommendations that the team worked so hard over the last 6 months to put together. So again, just introduce myself, Bree, program coordinator for PCAC. And then we also have Carrie Fugit, our Leadership Institute program manager through Daily Acts. And then Anna Lugo, the founder of Equity First Consulting, who helped us with just the equity part of this program. And before I hand it over to Julio, I'll just introduce the members that were not here with us tonight to help present. And we have Lynn Jin, Evan Cantwell, and Kylea Brown. And I will hand it to you, Julio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Rodriguez, and my pronouns are he and his. Currently, I work as a habitat restoration technician with Point Blue Conservation Sciences, the STRAW program, where we plant plants with students and teachers. And for the past 6 months, I've been part of the PCAC program, where I've learned a lot. So I hope y'all gain something from today.
Great. Thanks, Julio. All right. So briefly again, what is PCAC? If you don't know already, it's a 6-month equitable civic engagement program where we really design it to support the participants of this program to uplift the voices of our most impacted communities, specifically around transportation and climate change due to transportation. 60 to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions in Petaluma are due to transportation. So why is this needed and why is it important? Too often, these communities that are most affected, which means they're closest to the solution, are left out of these kind of decision-making processes. These are the communities like BIPOC communities that are breathing disproportionate levels of toxic smog, which lead to higher instances of cancer and asthma and other illnesses. Our lower income community, that's been a greater proportion of their income on transportation. So we really wanted to make sure that we uplifted these communities to let them know that their voices are being heard and what they say has to matter. So we do this in kind of a 3-step process. The first process is learning about equity principles. So we teach our participants about equity principles, transportation, local government. We have them also reflect on our assumptions and biases, because we all have them, and we want to ensure we're not perpetuating harmful narratives so people feel shame or guilt or just unsure about speaking up about their experiences with transportation. And part of that is also designing to the margins. So with this slide, you can see that a lot of the people in the center of this graph are the ones that are most often at the table, but we want to design to the margins. So we want our Black communities, our communities experiencing poverty, our undocumented communities, we want them to be at the head of the table with us. The other thing we use is the systems iceberg model. So we can see at the top, I drove to work today. So what the behavior that we're looking at here, we want to get to the bottom of the iceberg. What systems are in play to make us have these behaviors, and how can we fix these systems or enact equitable change? Part 2 of the methodology is, with all the information they earned from systems thinking, all of that, is conducting listening sessions. So there was a group listening session, as well as each participant was broken up into 2 teams, and they had their individual listening sessions. And then applying the lessons learned from part 1, applying the information they learned from their listening sessions to be able to present a set of policy recommendations to Petaluma City Council, to commissions, meetings, committees, and people actively involved in transportation here in town. And we broke up the recommendations into 2 separate parts. So we had our tangible recommendations, which was our interactive map. So this was a map that was created just specifically so we can put points on the map. Oh, this needs better lighting. Oh, this, bikeway is really uneven and there's not a lot of trees, things like that. But most of our recommendations were focused on systemic recommendations, because the systems are what we want to prioritize. So this is just a picture of our interactive map that was created. And you can kind of see the biking, the walking, the busing, everything like that. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Julio to get into our systemic recommendations.
So, hello everyone. And so our first set of recommendations have to do with walking, or making Petaluma more walkable. So first off, we recommend that the city prioritize a safe and enjoyable walking experience around key shopping centers and schools along McDowell and East Washington. Specifically, we recommend that the city add more lights around heavily trafficked areas, as well as trees for shade, so that during extreme heat events, people feel cool, and that's the sidewalks are well kept so that people have that feeling of safety. We also recommend we eliminate car lanes so that people don't have to walk right alongside four lanes of traffic, as well as widen sidewalks. We also need more crosswalks. And next slide. And so now, so this is a map that delineates the safe routes to school in Petaluma if you were to walk or bike. The problem with this map is that what a safe route is unclear. 4 schools aren't connected to any safe routes, and some safe routes on this map don't seem safe at all. And so we recommend that the city redefine criteria for safe routes to school to add more protective infrastructure and crossings. Specifically, we recommend that the city have crossing guards during the beginning and end of school days, that 4-lane roads not be considered a safe route to school because they fundamentally don't feel safe, and that safe routes to school avoid major roads. We also demand all schools have multiple safe routes to school. Next slide. And so now we're gonna go over the recommendations for biking. So our first recommendation is that we recommend the goal of transportation planning be bike safety, prioritization, and convenience. Specifically, we need protected bike lanes on major routes such as McDowell and East Washington, and we need traffic slowing. And this can be done by also again eliminating car lanes and adding more crosswalks. Our next recommendation is we recommend the city invest in creating a culture of respect and safety for bikers, with priority on people who bike for necessity. We need to add a process for reporting incidents between cars, bikes, and pedestrians to your report and issue site. Some other things that would be included on this report and issue subsection would be near misses, injuries, and incidents with angry drivers. We also recommend that the city invest in a campaign to encourage more biking. And our last biking recommendation is that we recommend the city make it fun, fast, and safe to cross between the east side of Petaluma and the west side of Petaluma via Washington Street. To do this, we recommend that East Washington be made into only 2 lanes as opposed to the 4 lanes it is now, that there be a protected bike-only lane, that the sidewalk be widened, and that we encourage local food vendors to sell their food on Washington Street, and that there be trees and bushes, as well as places to sit and relax, so that Petaluma is more and more for people and less for cars. Next slide. And so now we're gonna go over the recommendations for public transit in Petaluma. Our first recommendation is that we recommend the city invest in creating a dignified bus riding experience that celebrates the fact that our walkers, bikers, and bus riders are our true climate leaders, and they should be celebrated. Bus stops need to feel safe, comfortable, well-maintained with up-to-date route information. Rundown, exposed, standing only at dark bus stops send a message that we don't matter. We also need to build trust in the system by ensuring buses are reliable and more frequent, potentially coming every 15 minutes. And we also need to make sure that bus capacity meets the needs of all students. We had one of our listening session participants mention that when they entered the school bus or the bus that served where the bus where a lot of students are coming in, that they feel like they're entering a cattle car. And so this is what we mean by providing a dignified bus riding experience. When 60% of the ridership is students, we need to make sure that they're feeling valued. Next slide. And so now Ree's going to go over the next recommendations.
Thank you. So yes, the next recommendation was just lowering the barrier for new riders to use the system. And again, really centering students and service workers, immigrants, and seniors. As Julio mentioned, a lot of these students are riding the bus and just feel like they're cramped like a can of sardines. Also making sure that bus transfer information is a little more clear and more so linked with inner city connectivity. And also bus stops should be within a quarter-mile safe walking distance. I know someone had mentioned living at Baywood Arms and having to walk more than a quarter mile. And if they're walking home at night, it doesn't feel very safe. And then just making sure that we're also uplifting our service workers that are working past the time the bus stop's running. How are you supposed to get home when the bus stop's running and you have no other way of transportation? Nobody can pick you up, anything like that. And just culturally responsive info access was our next recommendation. And that's just culturally responsive information access and feedback mechanisms that advance bus rider agency no matter what. So just make it easier to find information, make it available in Spanish, maybe other languages that we see are highly used in this area, Petaluma. Alerting riders when there's cancellation. I know I was riding the bus and my bus would get canceled. I'm like, oh, I had no idea about this. It's not in real time. So speaking to that. And then again, just creating communication systems to target the biggest demographic. So students and lower income folks. And that would bring us to our next set of recommendations, which was community engagement. So really shifting from customer service to a community ownership model and just prioritizing community organizations that are already doing this work, that already know the community. So like McDowell Family Resources, Petaluma People Services, these organizations that already have a foot in the door and that community is comfortable with, and making sure that we're inviting these underrepresented communities to participate in public works projects. The next one was when to engage. These both recommendations came from two of the McDowell Family Resource Listening Session participants. So evening times, weekends, even social media, because a lot of people tend to be on social media. The mom that was there said, oh, you know, if you're at the 8:30 a.m. drop-off time for kids and you just bring some coffee, some donuts, and we can chit chat for, 10, 15 minutes, that would be really helpful to us. But it's more about having the city go to the community versus the other way around. And then finally, just having accountability mechanisms in place, making sure that we're really valuing the stories that people tell as opposed to just quantitative data, like you went to school for this, you know about this, but lived experience is so important in the work that PCAC does and what it's about. And just making sure that we're developing alignment between different departments when it comes to the city. And then our final call to action is just, restructuring funding, ensuring that these programs can continue citywide, statewide, countywide, so that we can continue the work that we're doing. I would also just like to say too, in terms of the engagement, the participants had a chance to enter into a raffle to win a bike package, which we're so thankful the city was able to fund because they were so grateful for that. One of the moms even said, oh, so great, we were able to pick up the bikes on my son's birthday. And I was super excited to be offering that incentive to us because it's hard for people to break away after a very busy day. And that's it. So I will go ahead and open it up if there's any questions or comments, anything like that.
Anyone want to comment or ask questions?
I'll just comment. I know you're going to various committees. I know you were with the PBAC a week ago, and you're with transportation today. You've been to the community, and I've seen your presentation and been involved about a month ago over at the community center. We all appreciate what you're coming up with, and it would certainly be great to get more minorities, more people, seniors like myself, on committees like this. We know what the problems are, but we don't know all the solutions. And we try to go that direction, but we need more input, obviously, from all groups of the city. So I appreciate the work you're doing, because this is certainly making us a lot more aware of what issues we have to work on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Josque?
Thank you. That's great, Rhea. I'm glad to see you here. I was also at the community presentation, and I know I was asked for comments and such. Are you going to take this to places like the Kiwanis Club and Lions Club too? Do you have any plans for that?
That I'm not sure of. I'm definitely there's some questions Carrie will probably be better able to answer than I can. So I'm happy to write that down, and when I see her later on today for CAC presentation, I can talk with her.
Great, yeah. No, I think it'd be good to hit those other community organizations as well as the city government ones. Great.
And I will
Yeah.
just second what Councilmember Tar said a moment ago. We have a vacancy on this committee right now, and we would love to have somebody come in, fill that, who is willing to work hard, to learn what the constraints are, to, look towards solutions. So please pass that along to anyone you know.
Great, thank you.
Just a positive with that, we are not the late night committees. This is our latest right now. I go to bed after I get home.
And then I had a quick question for you guys. I know you guys did a lot of community outreach and a lot of soft data collection. I did see that you guys put together a map. Did you have any other hard data that came from your listening sessions that we could then apply to actual creating policies? Or did you have any drafted policies that you wanted us to look over or anything like that?
We're in the process of actually trying to kind of just create a report for everything once all these presentations are done and have that good to go. The interactive map is a big thing we have, and then just the listening session quotes and what we took from the listening session participants to turn them into recommendations. So there's not really any other hard data, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's
Yes.
what I had. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you again. Appreciate your time, and we hope to be talking with you further.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of minutes for the meeting of March 9. Does anyone have any corrections to offer? Okay, I just have one then, if I could. On the micromobility report, it mentions that I suggest the committee and then 2 people volunteered, but I think I also volunteered, making a total of 3. The minutes are not clear on that point. If we could make that, I'd be pleased.
Yes, happy to make that change, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no other comments, I think the city policy is now for me to get a motion in a second, but we don't need to vote. So can I get a motion to adopt these minutes?
All motion.
Councilmember Postake, thank you. Second, Joey.
Second? Oh,
Mr. Tar, I think you're both trying. We'll go with Mr. Tar. At that point, the minutes are considered approved. Thank you. Public hearings. Mr. Hall, you'll talk first about the TIRCP
Yeah.
master agreement. Please continue.
Thank you. So the first couple items Ray's actually going to present for us, they're related to a couple of grant and enterprise funding items. The first one is our regional grants called TIRCP.
I'm gonna bring my PowerPoint up. Try something new this time. Instead of reading off paragraphs. Okay, good, you can see it. So this is the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, TIRCP, grant for $24.9 million. Again, I'm Ray Atkinson, the Senior Transit Planner. Next slide. There it goes. So this grant was a partnership between Petaluma Transit and also SMART, Mendocino Transit, Sonoma County Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, and Sonoma County Transportation Authority. And this partnership was really critical for us receiving the grant. I learned from when I went to CALAC last fall, the Caltrans said, basically every application that got approved had partnerships. And so this is really key for us to get this funding. And one of the it funds the second Petaluma Smart Station for $10 million. And that should be coming up next year to open. So I'm excited to see that coming with this funding source. There's also 3 projects that are directly given money to Petaluma. It's the about $940,000 for the transit facility improvements electrification, phase 2. And then second project is the $412,000 for bus stop improvements, like adding shelters, having trash and graffiti removal, that, basically cleaning up the bus stops was funded with that. And then the third project going directly to Petaluma is about $1.7 million for the bus fleet replacement and electrification project, which I'm going to go through each one of these projects over the next few slides. And this is for FY 23 through 27. So the transit facility improvements project, you see this is from PG&E. It's preliminary layout. There'll be more details coming up in the next few months, but this is the initial plan for how we're going to convert our transit yard to electrify it. And so that's pretty exciting to come up. As I mentioned earlier, there's $412,000 for bus stop improvements. This is an example of a clean bus stop. So hopefully all of them will look like this and stay like that once we get the bus stops in there with this funding. And then this is an example from Santa Rosa, how they already have electric buses. So we'll have a similar buses in Petaluma that are funded through this as we transition from fossil fuels to battery electric buses. Mm-hmm. Oh. Learning how this mic works. Okay, you can hear me better now. Thank you. And then the TIRSIP is part of the Transit Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. The main initiative of this is to have greenhouse gas emission reduction and electrification of transportation. So that's what this image here is showing, some of the green efforts. And this program was created by the California legislature in 2014 with Senate Bill 862. Next steps for this is to have a TAC recommendation for City Council to approve a resolution so we can execute the master agreement with Caltrans. Does anyone have any questions about this grant process?
There was one slide that you showed fiscal year 23 to 27. Was that accurate?
Yes.
So there's
This
a
one here.
so that's right.
Yes.
So the funding here has to make it all the way through 27? Is that
The project will be
the monies that are shown on this slide, they're going to cover us through that year?
Yes.
Okay.
And some of the projects are sooner rather than later, like the transit facility improvements. We're currently doing that project. And then the bus stop improvements, we probably think next fiscal year. So we're doing it. So it's timing of FY 23 through 27. And so there's more details I can send you if you like that has more breakdown of how these projects are programmed.
That's fine.
Okay.
I thought that was quite a spread, especially when you're talking about the electrification of buses. Aren't they over how many thousand? Is it $1 million for one of those things? Well, you're not going to get too many of those buses then.
It would be partial funding for multiple vehicles that we're hoping to purchase. And we have that window of 23 to 27 to spend it. We're hoping to spend it sooner rather than later within that. We don't have to wait till the end because we want to get the new buses out there, the bus stop improvements going. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but we have that long if needed for whatever reason.
Thank you.
For the benefit of our viewers, and perhaps a little bit for me also, and I saw your hand, I'll get to you in just a moment. Sorry about that. When we talk fiscal year 23, could you explain what fiscal year 23 is for the city? And I believe Caltrans has a different fiscal year.
And there's federal also is different.
We're
not doing federal, thank goodness.
I will let you provide a little education on that point if you could.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So fiscal year 23 for the city is July 1st through June 30th. And so we're currently in fiscal year 23. For Caltrans, I'm pretty sure they're in the same I think it's July through June for Caltrans too. I think federal is the only one that has think October through September, I think is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the numbering on the fiscal year is the fiscal year and is the calendar year in which the fiscal year ends.
Correct.
So fiscal year 23 ends in a month and a half, 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Just back. Thought that was the case, but I wasn't quite clear, and I thought our viewers might even be more puzzled than me.
Yeah, fiscal year 23 is July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
Okay. Councilmember Posake.
Thanks. I had a question for one or both of you. How many buses are in our fleet right now, total?
Right now, we have 14 fixed route buses, 11 cutaways. This grant will be funding for 10 vehicles, a combination of fixed route and paratransit, partial funding for each as part of a larger patchwork of funds.
And that's not a fleet expansion, that's just replacement of 10 existing vehicles.
Correct. It's a one-for-one replacement of vehicles when they reach the end of their expected lifespan.
And this would cover like 25% of the cost of each one? Do you have any estimate for how much of the cost of each bus this would cover?
We haven't calculated the exact percent. A fixed route bus should cost about 1.1 million approximately these days for, say, a 35-foot electric bus.
Yeah.
And then the cutaway buses, the electric ones are fairly new in that area. We're hearing anywhere from 200 to 250,000 per vehicle for each of those types.
But the bulk of funding for new buses will still continue to come from the federal, is it 5307 program? Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yeah, the biggest piece of any of our capital projects, especially bus replacements, comes from federal funds, FTA 5307. We can get up to 80% with some vehicles. There's a few nuances within how the region calculates, but that is always the lion's share of the funding. And then we have to make up the difference. We have to cover local match. And the more we can fill in with grants such as TERSIP, the less we have to spend funds like TDA, which are our enterprise funds that are flexible, that can be spent for capital operations. But those are always the last dollar in because they're our most flexible funds.
So the TERSIP becomes part of the 20% that the feds aren't willing to fund. Correct. Thank you.
One more.
Mr. Tar.
One more question. It was noted in one of the little reports here is that the gas and diesel powered buses that are taken out of the fleet are then attempted to be sold elsewhere. Now, if you're a real environmentalist, wouldn't you say you don't want to do that? Or are these just like the bus seats that are sold? How do we justify something like that?
So per city policy, with vehicles that are being sold by the city, we send them to auction typically. For buses, we send them the first capital auction so we can recoup some of those funds. With some of the vehicles that we've disposed of more recently, we've given them the nonprofits in some cases, if they're still beneficial there, if there's kind of a second life benefits. And with any of these, we're very much open to that as well. Either if any nonprofits may have an interest and want to approach us, or people want to let us know of an agency that may have an interest and we can approach them. That also is very much an option because we want to make sure that the buses, for as long as possible, can continue to serve and provide benefit to the community.
Well, that does make sense, but in 2030, what are we trying to do? I mean, at least for Petaluma.
You know, I think one way to look at it, Mr. Tar, if I could, is that there's a nonprofit out there who got a bus from us 10 years ago. They run it in the ground. They have no other options to buy a new bus other than taking our used bus. And 10 years from now, they get our used electric bus. I mean, yes, we'd love to have the money to get every converted now, but we just don't.
That makes sense. I'm just finding the irony in what we're doing here.
There's a lot of irony up on this, on the dais.
Yeah, I mean, some of those agencies may be running even older, even dirtier vehicles than our diesel buses. Right now, they are diesel, but we do, as a reminder, use 100% renewable diesel at least. So as much as possible, we mitigate the impacts. But yeah, I see what you're saying. You don't want to keep dirty, internal combustion engines out there longer than needed.
One of the things that I've noticed on the roads nowadays is there are 1950 buses out there that have been renovated, and it's a cost, but it's a club, I think, or clubs that do this. It's amazing some of the costs involved in the renovation and then the gas to travel anywhere in one of those things. Put it up on, some blocks and just look at it. That's good. Thank you. I'll be quiet now.
Any further questions?
Yeah, so it's kind of continuing that question is, so if we are then taking and auctioning it off, how do we define end of life for us? If there's still use in it, there's still value to auction it off, how do we define that we're done with it?
So for fixed route vehicles, federal life expectancy is defined as 12 years for them. With us, we run them for 15 years since our mileage is lower than a lot of other transit agencies to maximize the value. So typically it's 15 years. In some cases, we can run longer if, the procurements take longer. Right now, we're trying to get caught up with a lot of the grant funds we have. With COVID, that added some delays into the process. But generally, it's 12 years funded for a fixed route bus. We run ours 15. And then with paratransit, 5 years life expectancy for a cutaway. And we run ours for 8. So that's kind of been the standard. You can vary that a little bit if a vehicle is having a really bad time maintenance-wise, if they're doing really well, but that's been the standard.
If I could build off that question, about the time I first came on this committee, which was about a decade and a half ago, we were in the middle of expanding our fleet. We did that by acquiring some used buses, reconditioning them, painting them our colors, and once we'd used them for a while, we were able to use 5307 funds to replace those buses. When we look at the carbon neutrality goal of 2030, we need a much bigger fleet than we have now. Does it make sense to effectively sell these used buses back to ourselves, do the reconditioning, use that as a way to build our fleet? And yes, I know we have no room at the storage facility for that. That's a whole different problem. But just to build fleet, can we use those old buses as a bootstrap to build a fleet and make ourselves eligible for more 5307 replacement at some point?
Potentially, with the way the 5307 fleet replacement funds are handled regionally, it runs through MTC, and it's through a program called the TCP, Transit Capital Priorities Project. It's intended for one replacements of buses. They don't want all the agencies to expand their fleets and cover the 80% costs through those funds. So we do have the flexibility to do whatever we want with the vehicles once they're past the 12 years for the fixed route. We can keep them longer. We could run them longer. So that's all potential. As you mentioned, one constraint is the size of our yard. We're very much hemmed in, so we don't have a lot of storage for buses. People always ask if you could mothball them. You kind of can, but you really need to maintain them regularly if you want to be able to access them regularly and have them be reliable. So you still need to make sure you maintain them. And then to the points we were talking about before, they're also the older, dirtier buses in the fleets. And since we're already running ours 15 years, by many cases, they're having maintenance issues by the end of that timeline. So you're really starting to press your luck. And the costs with running those compared to newer buses really start to go up pretty exponentially at that point. You get into more and more complicated, expensive repairs. So I think it's a possibility, but those are some of the trade-offs that you look at when considering that.
Okay. Well, if we consider that fleet expansion will be a need for this department to meet climate goals, maybe fleet expansion should be something we talk about as one of our goals later today or in a workshop.
Absolutely.
Maybe what I proposed here doesn't make sense, but let's look at other alternatives.
Yeah, it ties in, to your point, to a larger discussion on the vision of the system and then the vision and needs of the fleet long-term to serve that. That's something that will warrant more discussion, more analysis over the upcoming year, is to say over 10 years or so, what service we want to be running, what number of vehicles. We do have some grant funds we're applying for that would allow for a couple of expansion vehicles, like a recent grants for AHSC, American Health. I'll look up the acronym. It escapes me.
Housing and supportive service, housing and supportive something?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
so. But that's a grant that we worked with SMART and the developer on related to the second SMART station on Corona. That was submitted earlier this month. And that would provide funding for several aspects. It would have funding for pedestrian and bike improvements within a half mile or so of that location. It would provide us with funding for buying an additional expansion vehicle and for doing bus stop improvements. And there's a lot of grants out there where we can look at, which may either be replacement funds or vehicle expansion funds at some point to run more service and to really get aggressive with meeting the city climate action goals and the large efforts to convert more single occupant vehicle mode share to transit. We're going to need more transit service and we're going to need more vehicles to run that service.
Bosque.
I'm going backwards a little bit to the PCAC presentation and looking for having a bus stop within a quarter mile, of every home. I'm wondering, there must be an app, and I know it's not on the agenda really, but is there an app, or have you ever had any estimate of how many of our current living units are within a quarter mile of a bus stop?
Well, I think that question actually depends on how you define a quarter mile. Is it based on how you travel by sidewalks or by a circle around it?
Yeah, for sure.
Walking network analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. So from the circle, just a quarter mile circle aspect, I don't know if we've actually do we have the map of that? Well, I think it's somewhere in the plans of what that map is. I just don't have it top of my head, but we can get back with you with that map.
No, I'm sure it's part of the walkable community, when you get your walking score for where you live, it must be part of that, no?
That's usually a consideration, is access to transit service and walk score. So we've done that in the past and we can look at more analysis. But to Ray's point, it's like, is it a quarter mile as a crow flies or a quarter mile for the pedestrian? What are impacts with things like elevation? If you're in West Petaluma, it can be a lot different, that quarter mile versus East Petaluma.
My son lives in Cotati, and I've often harassed him about taking the bus at least when his car's broken. And they're less than a quarter mile from the nearest bus stop as the crow flies, but like over 3/4 of a mile the way they have to walk to get there. Big ravines.
Yeah, well, we're not really trying to attract crows to take the bus now, are we?
Well, it also depends what the frequency on the bus route is. I mean, most of the west side of town really has no service. Yes, there are bus stops there for the 501 buses 2 or 3 times a day. That doesn't really meet any kind of need. So, anyway, okay. Good question. And if you were able to provide us
Yeah, I can look into that.
data, that'd be good. Thank you. This is an action item. I think that's correct,
Correct.
right? I
Yep.
need a motion to recommend to the council that they approve the resolution for the master agreement. Do I hear that motion?
Oh, I'm not done.
Oh, you have questions?
I got more.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Please, continue.
So one of the goals in the staff report mentions greenhouse gas emission reductions, and that was one of the things you mentioned in your presentation. Are we measuring that now, and do we have goals? Any hard data on that?
We report right now on the passenger miles traveled. We don't have a specific calculation. We've calculated for greenhouse gas, like pounds of emissions emitted annually, but that's something we could do because we know how many gallons of fuel we use. We know the average efficiency of vehicles. So we could make an estimate of that. We don't have it right now, but it's something we could create and present to the committee.
It seems like something that might be pertinent to this kind of idea of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Are we reducing them? We don't know. Yeah.
When we apply for grants such as these, that's usually a component. So we usually do calculate for that vehicle the impacts because they'll want to know how many pounds of emissions you're eliminating by converting your older diesel to a new electric. So on a per vehicle basis, we usually do that as part of the grant application. I just don't know that we've yet done it on the macro scale for the entire system, but we could fairly easily.
Okay, just interesting.
If I could,
Please.
I was, I've got to go back maybe and check with the city manager, but I thought, not that you would know how many gallons, but I thought the city was keeping track already of just at least the total number of gallons of fuel of various sorts used in city vehicles. Okay. But I'll
Because
check,
even if we're not measuring GHG, like Jared said, we could be reducing something. We could have something that we're measuring, saying that we're using less.
I believe that is the case. I can talk with Rihanna, the city climate manager. We definitely have it for transit.
Yeah.
I think we have it for the overall city fleets. We're also, of course, doing our fleet conversion master plan. So I think that's a good effort. That'll look more closely at that on a citywide scale. But I can ask Rihanna if she has that for the entire city fleet.
Okay.
For the whole fleet, that'd be really cool.
That meeting is actually right after us for what it's worth at 6 o'clock. So if people want to stick around, that may be a question.
Any more questions?
Yeah, one of your other goals was improving transit safety, and I didn't hear any talking points about that. And I was just kind of interested what your take on that was, what your goal would be, and kind of what was a path towards that. It's in the staff report is improve transit safety.
I think that was regarding bus stop safety, I'm assuming. I'm not sure for sure, though.
Okay.
I mean, I think it ties in a few different ways. The newer vehicles are inherently, a bit safer for everyone involved, whether you're a passenger or people on the road. The overall grant is safer because it's going to have bus stop improvements. It's going to improve sidewalks and bike lanes. So that was one of the overriding themes of the entire TIRSIP grant overall. And a lot of the most problematic areas in terms of the bike ped network were identified, and those are the ones that are being focused on with the grants. So that is just kind of a major overall theme with it. For us, probably most relevant on the side of the bus stop improvements.
Okay. All right. Cool. And then just this might be way in the weeds, but have noticed some bus shelters that are placed like in the pedestrian right of way, and that's reducing what the walk path, the amount of space you have to walk. And I was wondering if there's any goals with, you were mentioning putting in more shelters. Love it. Fantastic. Is there any goal of not having them in the pedestrian walking way?
Yeah, very much so.
mean,
We're
again, it
actually
might be-
working on creating our bus stop standards. We would prefer to never have any obstruction of the sidewalk. Our ideal situation would be a nice wide sidewalk or multi-use path, maybe 10 feet wide, and then a concrete bus stop, passenger pad behind it, so you have good amenities without obstructing it. Unfortunately, throughout the city, in many cases, we're limited with right-of-way. We're limited with existing sidewalk and infrastructure to where it's cost prohibitive to change out an entire block's worth of sidewalks to do that improvements, or we don't have right-of-way and the cost would be great to acquire it. So we're limited with the ability to put in, benches, shelters. For example, think of a lot of the bus stops on North McDowell, east of Washington. They're right near people's houses.
Yeah.
So you have a narrow sidewalk, but you'd be going to people's yards. And that's not right away the city has, unless it does changes like road diets, then it opens up a lot of those possibilities. But yeah, generally, we always want to build out the stops and not have any of those obstructions to the network whenever it can be avoided.
Awesome. I just thought we should mention it.
Any more questions? Anything else I missed? Nope. Now I will entertain a motion. Councilmember Posake, thank you. I need a second.
I'll second.
Councilmember, or Committee Member Calgen, sorry about that.
Just promoted me.
This one will take a roll call vote.
Alden,
Aye.
Calgen,
Aye.
Tar,
Aye.
Hosake.
Aye.
Motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously, thank you, minus the two absent members. That gets us on to the discussion of the, application MTC for the TDA and STA funds. Mr. Hall, is this going back to Mr. Atkinson again? It's your day.
Yeah, me again. So I created another PowerPoint for this, and the green squares you see here focus on two different funding sources that I'll be talking about. The Transportation Development Act, TDA, is a quarter-cent sales tax for this. And then there's the State Transit Assistance Fund, STA. And so those are the two funds that we're talking about in this process. And specifically for Sonoma County, the projection for the TDA funds was 5% higher than higher than the rest of the region. So that was a great bonus for us for the region to have more funding for Sonoma County. And overall, it was 2.9% higher for the whole region compared to last year for FY22. And I wanted to share this slide because it breaks down how Petaluma's TDA apportionment, we don't get all the $4 million for it, so it breaks down into Golden Gate Transit has about $1.1 million of that, and Sonoma County is just over $250,000, and then our portion of that apportionment is $2.4 million. And then since we don't have to use all of the funding, we decided to request $2.3 million of that for fiscal year 24. And then this also shows how the funding has increased over the years. So last fiscal year 22 was $245 million, and this year is $269 million. So it's been increasing. And then how we're going to actually use the money is this is for fiscal year 23 through 24, so coming up. It's 3 different projects: additional school tripper service, which will be happening later this year, later this calendar year, and start a new microtransit shuttle service we've been talking about for since last meeting. That will be funded through this as well, and then purchasing scheduling software as well. And for the STA funds, it works a little bit differently than TDA funds because we have to use that every year, and so we can't bank it to use later on. And so for the FY24 STA funds, it's $1.2 million, and we're requesting the full amount because we can't bank it. And so that money is there. And then as with the last topic, we need a tax recommendation for City Council to support our application for TDA and STA funds. And I also welcome any questions you have.
Question from anybody? Mr. Calgin.
Well, I was going to ask about the STA funds. I know that a portion of that comes from sales tax on fuel. And then with both Petaluma and a countywide ban on gas stations, is there a plan to sort of supplement that in the future? But you said that we're up over last year, so I don't think I should need to worry about that.
Nothing that I've heard of. That is an issue overall, as a lot of people have probably heard with any tax related to gas, diesel. Overall, one of the downsides, maybe the only one, of vehicles becoming more efficient is a lot of those mechanisms are based on a cost per gallon. So as vehicles get more efficient, less gallons of fuel, less tax coming in. I've not heard of anything myself definitively to look at that. Other states have done pilots on things like VMT, vehicle miles traveled. I think maybe Oregon is doing
Oregon
a pilot.
is what it's called.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oregon's been doing a statewide pilot on that. I haven't heard of anything California-based, but that is an example of a approach that could be taken to try to address the problem. Because in that case, you're now, I don't know if they fully replaced the gas tax mechanism or supplement it, but you have another one that's more tied to how often you're using the road system. So even if you do have a more fuel efficient vehicle, but you're out there logging a lot more miles, then you're paying an amount that people would say is more appropriate, to your actual wear and tear on it. Again, an idea out there, but nothing that I've heard that or similar at a statewide level in California that's close to implementation.
I also think that regarding the increase in funds, it may, since people did not drive as much during COVID in 2020, 2021, 2022, I think that the increase also had, people were driving more now that COVID restrictions are ending. And so that probably also contributed to that increase in gas usage.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the insight.
Other questions? I had two then. I think I had two. Just to be clear, maybe for our viewers, will you talk about the funds to which we are eligible this year for TDA are 2.4 million, only requesting 2.3. The 100,000 we are effectively banking. We don't lose that money by not asking for it. We just are not asking it to be transferred into our account.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, just make sure everyone else understood that. And then the agreements with Golden Gate and Sonoma County. Does that apply to both the TDA and STA funds?
That is just TDA. If you wouldn't mind going back to that slide, Ray. Golden Gate gets a portion of that TDA funding. SMART, as of several years ago, gets a portion of the STA funding. But as you can see, it's a pretty notable line item for us. Of TDA funding countywide, Golden Gate Transit gets 25%, and it's actually approximately 29% of the Petaluma TDA pot every year. And we don't really get a direct say, as a lot of people know, kind of in that funding specifically. But that's an off-the-top amount every year due to a long-standing, decades-old agreements that requires that as part of the TDA component.
But that's only TDA. I never really asked that question before. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Postke.
I just wondered that, I presume there's formulas used for how much goes to Golden Gate Transit System. And is that like recalculated every year based on use, or has that been the same for 20 years?
That 25% countywide has been the same for decades, going back to the late 80s. The amount of how much we get TDA on a county-wide scale is kind of formula-based. I think there's a population and a revenue-based component. So the overall pot is based on that. The 25% doesn't fluctuate, and there's no factors that create a formula. The agreement is a, fairly simple, rigid one that says they're entitled to 25% of the funds at a county-wide level.
And if I remember correctly, the only way to modify that is to get concurrence from Golden Gate, which they are loath to offer.
Both parties would, yes, have to be willing to come to the table to discuss that. And one party can't unilaterally open that discussion.
That has been a burr in my saddle for over a decade, so yes. Any further questions? And then once again, I will entertain a motion to recommend to the council that they submit this or approve this resolution. Do I hear that, a motion? Mr. Tar, I saw that. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Calhoun got there first. This will again be a roll call.
Alden,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Tar,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
That gets us to goals for fiscal years 24, 25. Mr. Hall, is that your item?
It is, thank you. So as people may recall, this is a continuation item from the discussion we had at the March 9th Transit Advisory Committee meeting. And what we're doing is we're doing our update of the committee goals that we do every 2 years. And so I won't rehash, all the different aspects of the goals, but you'll note this is a modified version that hopefully accounts for all of the feedback we received last week or last month from the committee. So what we did is we went through and we updated the list accordingly. So some of the items that were outdated were removed related to COVID, since we're pretty much in the clear of that, I would say. Some of the items were new ones that were added altogether that weren't represented, and some were modified language. What was already in there, but modified based on what we heard last week or last month as a recommendation, such as the goal that I think Chair Alden had of wanting to have a 20% increase in ridership. We had a goal to increase ridership, but not with that quantitative piece that he requested be added. So some of the highlights that we did account for based on our last meeting are we wanted to install additional amenities at bus stops, including shelter, seating, and bike parking at bus stops and what I'm calling transit supportive locations, like transit hubs, smart station, other major destinations near transit, things like that. Additional bus pullouts along major arterials like Washington, North McDowell, and Petaluma Boulevard. Additional outreach and emphasis on youth ridership. That, of course, was one of the areas of emphasis for the presentation we had earlier. Lots of great feedback, but one of the ones there in particular was the emphasis on youth ridership, knowing how important they are to the system. I always tell people 58% of the riders are K through 16 grade students. So that's really a huge piece of the current ridership system. So doing additional work and receiving additional input and feedback from the youth and student community. Expanded outreach and discussion with Petaluma employers to help promote our system to their employees and customers. Adding that 20% goal to the ridership increase. Implementing additional transit service to downtown Petaluma through whatever mechanism, whether that's fixed route service or some of these paratransit shuttle pilot programs we've been talking about, but kind of an overall increase in accessibility to transit in downtown, even considering things like hours of service and things like that running later into the night. Improved integration of transit into citywide planning and land use, and increased emphasis on transit-oriented developments. It's one thing to have new developments. It's another to make sure that they're mixed use. So you can do different behaviors there, like you can shop and you can eat, and it's not just one use. And things like transit-friendly design. Is your building and the entrance close to a bus stop, or is it set back, a quarter mile behind huge seas of parking? So it's one thing to have those developments. It's another to have them be friendly and accessible to active transportation and transit. Emphasizing ensuring that transit receives a portion of funding resulting from any future VMT, vehicle miles traveled, impact funds received by the city. That's something that we heard is, as the city is looking at VMT as part of the work that they're doing with other committees, if there was any shift in funds related to that, making sure that it goes towards the areas that are helping to address that specifically, like transit, bike and pedestrian connection improvements, things like that. So there's a clear nexus between, kind of what's causing the impacts and the solutions to help mitigate it. And then adding additional evening and weekend mobility options, even to things like committee meetings, to council meetings. We often hear, I can't go to those meetings and still get home afterwards on transit. So that's another consideration. So those were the main changes that we reflected in this version of the goals. Of course, not a final list. Always open to more comments, inputs. And I think, especially with the great feedback we had from PCAC earlier, we're going to take a look through those recommendations and reach out and speak more closely with Ree and the other folks involved in PCAC to make sure we're really kind of addressing some of the feedback and items that they have and they heard about from their project. And so that's it, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions.
I have
Mr. Charles?
This is not necessarily a question, but the presentations that we had today, I assume some of their suggestions are filtering through into our goals. If not, we need to pay attention, I think, to a lot of what was said. I have some stupid ideas for entertaining and bringing more readership. We need maybe a trivia pursuit game on buses. Reader questions with answers within 10 seconds, just to entertain people who are taking the bus. Maybe even some painting of the buses, which I know other communities do. Characters, I don't know, cartoon characters. Inside, the same thing. It's just another fee and that we have to come up with. But I think you need to do that to get the kids to help get the kids on the bus. And maybe even me, which I try to take, but my suggestions only.
Mr. Post?
I think the Art Commission has actually given some commissions to high school students interested in art. I don't remember the details, but
Sure. In other communities, they do these things, and then maybe we've tried it here. I think
and
we
I'm
probably
sorry.
have.
Yeah, we're actually working, and people may recall, on a project that overlaps with the art committee about adding bus stop public arts. So that's something that we're working on now and hopeful to have completed, implemented within the next couple months or so.
Okay, that's the direction. Good direction.
Any other questions?
I noticed on here one of the looking at the transit advisory committee goals. You mentioned transit signal prioritization. That's super exciting. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so that's a system we actually have running right now on our buses. I don't know if people know that. It's something we should probably do, more of an education campaign, if people would find it exciting. It can be somewhat technical, but basically, transit signal prioritization, or TSP, is a system that uses hardware on buses and in your traffic infrastructure, like at intersections. And basically, what it lets them do is it tells the intersection that a bus is coming. And it can do things like it can extend the green light for the bus. Instead of it hitting a yellow or red, it'll keep it green for a few seconds longer so the bus can make the light and not be slowed down. Or in some cases, it can even tell the intersection that the bus is coming, please cycle a bit faster so that the bus can get through it sooner. So that's kind of a basic level, but I think that, and tied with more advanced items I'd like to do in the future, like queue jumps that we don't currently have in the city, to where maybe buses get the ability to go ahead of the general traffic at busy intersections. That's kind of a long-term thing. But all of those kind of tie into that concept of TSP. It's running on the buses, but I want to do a bit more fine-tuning with it, and then let people know that the system is out there. Again, hopefully they find it exciting and not overly kind of technical to explain.
I find that very exciting.
Well, I'll jump in then, not seeing any other hands raised. Something the mayor says frequently, maybe in private conversation, but I've certainly heard of him more than once, is if you have 37 top priorities, you have no top priorities. And when I read this list, that sort of strikes me, that's what I'm seeing here. There's nothing here I disagree with, but there's nothing here that jumps out at me as, hey, this is the thing we absolutely have to get done that we weren't going to do otherwise. There's no passion that's created by this document. And that's not a criticism. It's just, there's so many things going on in transit, it's hard to figure out how to arrange it properly. My suggestion earlier to Mr. Hall before the meeting began is that we schedule a non-meeting workshop. We'd meet in this place, but it wouldn't be a regular meeting, it would be a workshop to talk about how to arrange this list, make sure we all understand what all the goals mean, how to present it in a way that it drives more community enthusiasm. It's not something I can officially make happen, but I'm suggesting to Mr. Hall that he consider that, and I endorse it, and maybe hopefully the rest of the committee sees the same value I do.
I would definitely agree that there's benefit to be gained there.
I put together a pursuit game, trivia pursuit game.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're definitely receptive to that, Mr. Chair. We want to make sure that the list covers all the items and that it's meaningful, helpful, accessible to people, and it speaks to them in a way that they understand it and get motivated by it. So
Yeah, motivated is really the word I'm going for.
yeah.
Energized.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was intentionally thus far not done with like a top 10. I didn't want to reach those conclusions myself, but I think if we do this type of workshop, that's something we could talk through more. Is that the way we take it? And based on the input we get, do we want to try to come up with a top 10, for example, things like that?
Yeah, and that top 10 can be tricky too, because I think the council got into this problem. They don't want to take anything off last year's top 10, but there's probably some things that do belong on there. So I don't want to get trapped in that side either. So, okay, so I didn't see any further comments. There's nothing here for us to adopt today, which is fine. This conversation will continue. And we encourage the public to come out and talk to us when that workshop does happen.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, we always love to have the public at any meeting, but especially one like that that's setting, a lot of the vision for the next couple of years. It's especially helpful.
Yep.
Dave, have you had any workshops like that, and what time, what day of the week or time have they been? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we've never had a workshop like
Okay,
this on
I
transit.
wasn't sure.
I'd assume it would still be on the regular Thursday, 4:00, just,
Okay.
maybe in place for next meeting if there's nothing else scheduled that day, or, I don't know.
I'll just draw your attention to the presentation we had at the beginning of the meeting where they said people can't always attend 4:00 get-togethers.
I would agree, but I get that, but if you go to 6:00, then a lot of the buses stop running, they can't take a bus to get here and go home again. There are no great times.
I mean, we can, if you choose any one time, it's always going to be tricky to balance out, who can access it or not. I see the trade-offs. Yeah, it's hard for people if you have a late meeting to be able to get there to and from with transit. A lot of people work, during the day, so it's hard for a lot of people come during what's considered regular working hours. Maybe we'll try to come up with a balanced approach, like integrate it with the websites so we can post it on there. We can get more feedback through that channel. People, of course, can always submit emails and things along those lines. We'll get together, we'll brainstorm about a bit more staff to try to have a few contingencies so that even if that meeting doesn't hit everyone, they can't come to it. Everyone has the ability to submit that feedback.
Mr. Postgate.
Just put it out there for, since we're talking about this, is that I think the council is going to take up a proposal by the city clerk to revamp pretty general, at least, maybe, I'm not sure if it's minor or major, but a general revamping of boards, commissions, and committees, at least by the second meeting in May.
Really? Revamp in what way?
This is just on a preliminary agenda, listed as an item of reimagining or reconsidering our boards, commissions, because, we've all been quite in trying to avoid council criticism of only having 10 goals and 10 major goals. We have been presented a pretty interesting document on how many hours the city staff spend on commissions and committees, and probably haven't looked at that for 6 months or a year, and so don't hold me to this, but I think it's something like a third of all their time spent on the commissions and committees, each staff member.
Okay, I will look forward to seeing that. I think at this point we've concluded our business on goals for the day. Committee comment. I will start on my far right. Okay. Mr. Calgin, any comments?
Yeah, I had just a lot of stuff going through this. Generally, I'm pretty excited with, especially this being what our second in person and our third regular meeting. I'm excited to see the Moss kind of coming off and us really getting into getting some stuff done. And these goals are exciting. I would love to see a little bit more forceful language, concrete language, a little more measurables. But all in all, I think these are goals, and so I won't get too hung up on that. I'm feeling optimistic.
Mr. Dar?
I don't have anything yet.
Councilmember Postgate?
Yeah, no, I also agree with that again, I'd be in favor of, not a number for every one of these goals, but maybe for three of any top 10 list we have, for three of the goals, have a number.
Okay, and then one last comment this is from Vice Chair Chisholm. It has nothing to do with goals. But he said after the last meeting, he had a viewer that day call him with some really good ideas about increasing youth ridership. He was in the middle of installing a window and couldn't take notes, so encouraged her to email him with the thoughts because he really wanted to follow up. She never did so. So if perchance she's watching today, please email us those comments. We would like to hear what you had to say. So with that, we move on to the Transit Manager's report.
Thank you. And on that last item, the email address to contact us is in all the meeting agendas. So anytime anyone wants to send us an email, that's where they can find it easily. So we're on to the Transit Manager's reports. Just a few things to highlight from there. As we discussed before, our K through 12 free youth transit program will be starting soon. That'll be kicking off on June 1st of this year. And so we're currently working with several transit agencies to do a coordinated marketing messaging push for that, coordinated campaign. And so I anticipate we'll have that imagery and messaging for everyone next month at our committee meeting. But we're partnering with Santa Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, Marin Transit, and SMART all of those agencies will be running free over the summer. And then 3 of those, ourselves, Sonoma County, and Santa Rosa, continue to run free beyond that as part of the funds that we received from the county, the climate mitigation funds, for a period of 2 years, and hopefully longer, but 2 years minimal. So that'll be starting soon. More information on that upcoming at the next meeting. Looking forward to that. Butter and Eggs Day is upon us again. Of course, that's one of the biggest days for us in transit, maybe the biggest day in the city in terms of visitors. I wouldn't be surprised. That, of course, is on Saturday, April 22nd, which is the same day as Earth Day. And we are going to be running fare free on that day. And we're providing additional service beyond a regular Saturday on Route 11. So we'll be running every 15 minutes. That schedule was included in the packet, so people can see that schedule and brochure. We encourage people to get out there and ride. It's a much easier way, much greener way to get down to the parade. Needless to say, it's going to be difficult to get down there in the park. So biking, riding transit is a great idea on that day in particular. So we love to see people come down. And we'll be doing outreach. Staff will at Copeland Transit Mall and at the East Side Transit Center that day. So looking forward to meeting some people as well.
Didn't you say you're gonna have a bus in the parade also?
We will, yes.
Okay, and
Thanks
who
for
do
the
you have,
reminder.
who do you have riding on that bus?
Who do we have riding it? No one riding it right now. I think we're open to ideas if people want to ride it, if members of the Transit Advisory Committee want to ride it. We've got many seats available, so just let me know and we can provide for that.
Do you know what the start time is for your place in the parade?
I don't know exactly. We're determining that now in the order. I can follow up with you and tell you afterwards.
I mean, the city council's all walking at 10:30, I think. Is it closer to a half hour or an hour to get through the parade route? I certainly don't think
Let's
it's
be
over
on
an
the
hour.
bus.
Depends on what breaks down.
Yeah. No, it's only 7 blocks. I mean, but at a snail pace.
I got to say, I always work and do outreach every year for the parade. Ironically, I've never actually seen the parade because I'm always working over at Copeland Transit Mall during it. I would love to. And then the last item I touched on earlier is the grant application for AHSC, which is the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program. So the city submitted that for approximately $20 million earlier this month. And again, transit would benefit with additional funds for electric bus purchase, facility improvements for the transit yard, and bus stop improvements if successful, in addition to the other city benefiting projects like the building of the smart platform. It has more money for that. And then more improvements to the bike ped network within approximately a half mile of that as well. We anticipate hearing back on that item in June or thereabouts. And that is pretty much it. Our next meeting is scheduled as of now for Thursday, May 11th.
Any comments for the transit manager?
Yeah, we talked a lot about outreach kind of throughout this meeting. And I think I saw something in your report about filling that position.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we close on that?
We are, yeah. So, I mean, one of the real bright spots for us has been staffing and hiring over the past month. We've actually had 9 drivers training over the past month, which for an agency our size is huge. And we're at the point now where, on a daily basis, we're covering all the service. It's amazing how fast it turned around, and I applaud MV for doing a great job over the past couple of months with that. But we're actually at the point where we have enough drivers, and when people come in to interview, we're actually hitting a pause on that because we have a full slate of drivers. But of course, we want to add more of these services, as Ray was alluding to earlier. But on the city side, we're doing the interviews for the transit specialist position, the one formerly filled by Sylvia Martinez Palacios. Currently doing interviews right now. So if all goes well, we may even have a new person in that position by the next meeting who you'll be able to meet. So
That's for what, I'm sorry?
that is for the transit specialist, which is our lead person on marketing, communication, outreach. So for the moment, we're kind of splitting those duties,
Yeah.
you know, Ray, myself and Carly doing it, you know, not the best job, but we'll have a dedicated expert doing it at that point.
It's kind of hard to replace the person who had been doing it for years.
Yeah, it's big shoes to fill with Sylvia, as we know. Sylvia's great.
Anything else? Then I think we are concluded. We will adjourn